I'm a Christian, I believe in it, but I don't think it's very sensible to start trying to view every decision you take as if it were as a sort of religious rather than a political decision. I mean, yes, of course, it has an influence on my life and the values that I believe in, but I don't wear it on my sleeve.
To your life, isn't it?
Well, of course it is. Yes, of course it is. But I don't like it, to be honest, when politicians make a big thing of their religious beliefs. So I don't make a big thing of it.
No, I'm just trying to explore the sort of chap you are, really, Prime Minister, with respect. And the question of your religious conviction is very important. I mean, is it...
Of course it is, yes.
Is that what makes you...
It doesn't inform every political decision I make in a very narrow way. Well, of course it... Look, I'm a person, an individual with a character, and part of my character is about what I believe in, and part of my beliefs, obviously, is a religious conviction. I simply hesitate whenever I get drawn into this territory, because I found over time that it either leads to people misunderstanding the basis upon which you're taking decisions, or it leads to people trying to colonize God or religion for one particular political position. I make no claims to that at all.
Is it your religious conviction that makes you tolerant of the idea of faith schools?
No, I think there is a strong case for faith schools, because I think parents often like to have their children brought up with a certain ethos that they believe in. And I think people should remember about faith schools. We've had faith schools for years in this country. The issue is simply whether we say to the Muslim community, you can have Christian faith schools, you can have Jewish faith schools, but you can't have Muslim faith schools. Now, I don't know how I would explain that to them.
You don't accept the force of Peter Haynes' point the other day, that that will be likely to encourage what he calls isolationism in the Muslim community?
No, I think that it is actually better to have communities feeling that they can have faith schools, which obviously then abide by the national curriculum, than having sometimes people on a more of an ad hoc basis with particular majorities in particular schools.
You'd be happy for a child of yours to be taught that it was literally true the world was made in 6 days?
Well, I don't know that my children are taught that. I'm not sure that any children are.
You would be happy for your child to go to a school in which that was imparted as fact?
Well, I don't know that it is imparted as fact. Who imparts that as fact?
Well, creationists imparted as fact.
Well, I think if this is to do with the school up in the northeast, I wouldn't believe everything that's said. I think you will find that the school abides by the national curriculum and teaches its children perfectly well. And I may just say, I know there are a lot of criticism of that school. Look at the results. They're pretty good. Most parents will want their children to have the results as good as that.
Is it appropriate to teach creationism in a state school?
I don't believe that it does in the way that you're suggesting. And I think it's important. I mean, I don't have all the particular facts at my fingertips in relation to this individual school, but I do know that some of the allegations that were made were disputed.
Is it appropriate, as a matter of principle, that creationism be taught in a state school?
I'm not sure that it is. And therefore, I don't know that it's a
with respect,
question.
That's not the question.
Well, it is in the sense that there's no point in asking me a completely hypothetical question. I don't have any, because I don't think they're very sensible questions to answer. I think that the issue of faith schools is, to my mind, you've got to answer it in two ways. Is it right to have any faith schools at all? Well, I personally believe that it is, that it's a right for people, if they want, to have their children brought up in a certain way, and Catholic or Church of England schools have a certain ethos in those schools. Right, that's the first question. But some people will say, no, there shouldn't be any faith schools allowed at all. The second question is, if you should have faith schools, or if you permit faith schools, is it right to tell the Muslim community that they're the one community that can't have such schools?
If there is a moral element to your philosophy and to your actions in government, how is it justifiable to make poor people even poorer by, as in the case of parents with misbehaving children, taking away their child benefit?
First of all, this isn't directed at poor people. It would be directed at those that were falling down on their duty of responsibility for their own children. And secondly, you might as well say that a family that is of a low income should never be fined, should never have any form of its benefits withdrawn. I mean, we don't say that.
Are you going to do it?
We are looking at it. We're examining it very seriously, because I believe that with a government that is putting a massive amount of money into helping young people off benefit and into work, huge amounts of money into programs like Sure Start and better nursery education, making a big investment in our education system, we are entitled to demand from parents some minimum responsibility back for society. And to say, if your child is engaged in persistent truanting, refusing to cooperate, and the police and the education welfare officers and the school and everyone is at their wits' end, well, I'm sorry, but we shouldn't carry on paying out benefit to you in circumstances where you're not prepared to give anything back to society.
That sounds as if you're going to do it.
Well, we're examining it. We've got to examine it to make sure it's practical. But as a matter of principle, I think it is right that with benefits come responsibility.
What about the idea that is contained in Frank Field's bill of removing housing benefit?
I support that. I support the idea that if you get people who are convicted of antisocial behaviour and who, again, have had every chance in most of these cases in behaving properly, and they refuse to do so, and they're making life hell for all their neighbours, then why should the state carry on paying out benefit to those people, subsidising their housing when they're using their housing to inflict misery on other people? And, you know, it's difficult probably for people like us to understand what it's like to live on an estate when, you know, you get one family in an area, and it's not, the vast majority of people in these areas are law-abiding, decent people, but you get one family or two or three families that make life absolute and total hell for people. And it's not right.
How is making them homeless going to make them behave better?
Well, you know, I'm afraid in the end, you might as well say, why is it right that you punish anyone for anything? You know, in the end, if people are given every chance to behave responsibly, you've got to protect other people who suffer the consequences of their
irresponsibility. Even if that means a family becoming homeless?
Well, if it means evicting them from the place that they are, and as you know, some families have been evicted with the antisocial behaviour orders, but I'm afraid in the end what happens is in those areas the other families can live in a bit of peace and quiet. And, you know, I think it's... You asked me about my beliefs earlier. What I think, and I hope I've done, is in one sense return to a very old-fashioned left-wing idea and value, and that is the value of responsibility. Responsibility to other people, which is why it's so important that society takes measures to help people in poverty and lift them out of poverty, but also responsibility to society, to put something back. For it not all to be take, there's got to be some give as well. And I find, you know, I mean, just to give you an example, I mean, when you see, you know, gangs of young people, and again, the vast majority of young people behave well, incidentally, and young people are the victims of a lot of this crime. So we're not stigmatising all young people. When you see gangs of young people out of control, making life hell for local people, often elderly, vulnerable people, it's not right. I mean, I don't know how I justify that. And therefore, it's not harshness or being right-wing or Tory or any of the rest of it. It's simply saying to people, in the end, society, community, that basic thing that I do believe in strongly, community, it's a deal. It's not a one-way street. It goes both ways, the opportunity and the responsibility.
When you go back to those old-fashioned values, how are they consonant with your party taking money from a pornographer?
Oh, you know, these funding stories, they come, they go. These are people who own the Express newspapers.
Yes.
Right, well, in that case, in my view, it's perfectly acceptable for us to take a donation from them.
They also own horny housewives, mega boobs, posh wives, Skinny and Wrigley. Do you know what these magazines are like?
No, I don't, but I do know that if someone is able and fit and proper to own one of the major newspaper groups in the country, then there's no reason why we shouldn't accept donations from them. And the only difference between us as a political party and what went before is that all the donations are made openly, and so that every single thing about party funding is for the first time out in the open.
But you wouldn't take money, I take it, from a tobacco manufacturer, but you would take it from a pornographer.
Well, I've said what I've said, and I've got nothing else to say. We dealt with it a short time ago, and the original allegation, you might remember, is that we'd pushed the...
There's no dispute about the money.
There's no dispute about the money, but the original allegation, as you remember, was that somehow that the the takeover of this group had been cleared as a favour for this money.
No, I'm not suggesting that for a moment.
But people were suggesting that, and once that original allegation was shown to be complete nonsense because the decision was taken by someone else, then they move on to something else.
I'm just curious to know how you reconcile taking money from a pornographer with your deeply held Christian values.
Well, I've said what I've said on it.
When you look at this issue, doesn't the case for some sort of state funding of political parties become more or less unanswerable?
Look, if I could get shot of ever raising a single penny for the Labour Party ever again, I mean, would I not do it? Absolutely, of course
David Blunkett says state funding is inevitable.
Yeah, but you can't do it, Jeremy, unless there's a consensus amongst the political parties. You can't have a situation where we as a government use our majority to push it through. I mean, and I'm not sure the public would accept it either. So, I mean, look, I honestly don't know what to do about this. All I know is, when I became leader of the Labour Party, 90% of the funding and more was from trade unions. People shouted foul. We changed it, so we took money from businesses and individuals. We then came into power, and for the first time ever, we've opened up the books so that everybody knows where we get our money from. The reason half these people are targeted is because the press has a list of all the people that donate to us. We haven't the faintest idea, not merely what people, but from what country the Conservative Party got their money from in their 18 years of government. All we've had is grief from that as well. Can we move to a different system? Again, I honestly don't know. But it can only be done as part of a general debate in which people are prepared to have a mature look at how parties fund themselves, because we need political parties. I have to employ people in the Labour Party. You know, every bit of the money we get, it doesn't go into my pocket or any other Labour politician's pocket. It goes to employ staff, and democracies need political parties, and political parties can only run with money. And I don't actually want to return to a situation where we take all our money off the unions. I don't think it's healthy either. So I agree, it's a very, very difficult issue, this.
I wonder sometimes when you sit here in number 10, you know, one day it's donations from a pornographer, another day it's something else. All these events pressing in on you. Do you ever think, I've had enough of this?
Well, no, I don't think that, because I think, despite all the rubbish that comes in and out, there are really worthwhile things to do.
So you plan to carry on and on and on, do you?
No, I haven't said that. I've never said that.
Well,
I had a feeling we were getting to the when are you about to step down question. And if we can, again, shortcut that, I'm not saying anything about it at all. But I think what you've got to do is decide what it is you want to achieve in politics, and that's what should determine your appetite for it or not.
But do you plan to lead the party into the next election?
I've said that I'll stand for a full term. And
that would be a full term, full third term?
Yeah, but I'm honestly not getting into speculating about it. Please. I'm really not getting into the issue of whether I'm a go on and on and on person or I'm about to resign tomorrow person. I'm not. I'm carrying on. I'm doing the work that I'm doing. I think we've got huge challenges still ahead. I've every bit as much appetite for the job as I've ever had. And despite, you know, the slings and arrows, it's a privilege to do it, isn't it? It's an absolute privilege, and I should never forget that.
Prime Minister, thank you.
Thank you.
And straight after the programme, our political editor Martha Carney will be chairing a discussion on Tony Blair's interviews over the last 3 nights. She'll be joined by Michael White of The Guardian and Danny Finkelstein of The Times. You can send your questions by email or by text message. Watch the debate on our website, or if you're a digital satellite viewer, you can press the red button on your handset. Now, George Bush has spent an uncomfortable day with his people trying to explain away why he failed to pass on warnings the White House had received before September the 11th that terrorists were planning to hijack American aircraft. What happened that day has cast a shadow over just about every area of American life. Now, one of the country's best-known journalists has said that the American response to the so-called war on terrorism has created a climate of effective censorship in a land claiming to be the home of free speech. Our culture correspondent, Madeleine Holt, reports.